Say it like this. Roots, beans, and greens, melons and beans. Eat like a king, it's an African thing. Roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Teach some of you fresh fruit from my queen. Roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Eat like a king, it's an African thing. Oh, yeah, yeah. Have you ever seen the edible wall with the drip drop eating good in the fall? What you know about that compost tea? Keep it OG with the worms on creep. You're on what you eat. You smell the greens when I speak. See me doing yoga 7 times a week. My food is so hood, organic concrete. It's B-boy fresh, unique to the beat. It's a global call to action. It's time to grow. Save up your water, put away your seed in a dry place. Compost your leaves, cause you see, and I love roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Eat like a king, it's an African thing. Roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Teach all my youth fresh food for my queen. Roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Eat like a king, it's an African thing. All roots, beans, and greens, melons and things. Teach all my youth fresh food if you want it. See me in the farmer's market. Roots, beans, and greens, I got it.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. This is what food justice looks like. Music credit goes to DJ Cabin Motivation. Food justice, hip hop for the body and the mind. My name is Deborah Mutnick. I teach in the English department at Long Island University's Brooklyn campus, and I'm one of 5 co-directors of the Campus Community Urban Sustainability Program, CUSP, together with biology professors Tim Leslie and Carol Griffiths, and philosophy professor Margaret Quanzo, who will be moderating today's event. The 5th member of our team is Jay Shuttleworth, an assistant professor of education at CUNY Queens College. CUSP set out to develop curricula on urban sustainability across the curriculum and to work with students, colleagues, and community members to understand and contribute to solving the environmental and ecological problems of our times. We're grateful for the support of Long Island University and a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. We have 2 other virtual forums scheduled for this spring: Urban Health in the Time of COVID with urban health scientist Angeli Sawtoff, and Climate Change and the Future of the Planet with climatologist Cynthia Rosenzweig. We hope you will be able to join us for these important conversations. I'll place details in the chat box toward the end of today's forum. Finally, before I turn the program over to Margaret, a few notes on the webinar. Participants can see the presenters, but the presenters cannot see you. I'll turn the chat box on after the talks and you may comment there. I would ask, however, that you write questions in the Q&A, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm pleased to introduce Margaret Quanzo, Professor of Philosophy and Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at LIU. Please welcome Margaret.
Thanks, Deborah. Our first speaker, Karen Washington, is a farmer and community activist. As a community partner and board member of the New York Botanical Garden, she worked with Bronx neighborhoods to turn empty lots into community gardens. As an advocate and former president of the New York City Community Garden Coalition, she stood up and spoke out for garden protection and preservation. As a member of La Familia Verde Garden Coalition, she helped launch a city farms market, bringing fresh vegetables to the community. Karen is a board member of Farm School NYC, leading workshops on growing food and food justice across the country, of Soulfire Farm, an organization committed to undoing racism and injustice in the food system, and of Why Hunger, a grassroots support organization aimed at ending hunger. In 2010, she co-founded Black Urban Growers, BUGS, an organization supporting growers in both urban and rural settings. And most recently, in 2019, she co-founded the Black Farmer Fund to support Black farms and businesses with capital and resources in New York State. In 2012, Ebony Magazine voted her one of their 100 most influential African Americans in the country. And in 2014, she was the recipient of the James Beard Leadership Award. Since retiring from physical therapy in 2014, Karen is co-owner and farmer at Rise and Root Farm in Chester, New York. It's my pleasure to welcome Karen Washington.
So I like to begin. So Deborah, why don't you give me the first slide? Yes, thank you so much. So hi, everybody. My name is Karen Washington. I tell people I'm a farmer. I grow food. I feed people body and mind. I am so glad to be talking about this subject, food justice, because I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And I can remember back in 1996 when people were talking about food insecurity and food security, that the World Food Summit said this. They define food security as existing when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. And so I couldn't understand that because time and time again, there were people pointing their fingers at both urban and rural communities, telling us that if you want food security, all you got to do is grow some vegetables, give up that soda and candy, drink water, and exercise. And if by magic, all of a sudden, by eating vegetables and giving up soda and drinking water, we're going to solve the problems in the food system without looking at the institutional and structural determinants that reinforce racism in today's society. And so a question that I would ask time and time again, folks, we live in the greatest country in the world where we grow enough food, and we waste enough food, yet that food is not getting down to the people that need it the most. Now, some of you would say, you know what, you're right. And I've heard time and time again, they would say, you know, you're right. The food system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And, you know, like all of you, I was like drinking a Kool-Aid, and I used to believe that until I started to look at the food system, look at the struggle for healthy food and clean water, which was bringing to the surface the social economic disparities I was seeing, especially in communities of color, and that these disparities did not happen overnight. Next slide. Go back one, please, because it was about the American diet. Believe it or not, the American diet was once plant-based, full of vegetables and fruits and grains. And now, look at it now. Now it's more animal-based, full of processed food, junk food, fast food. As a result, our caloric intake has increased from 2,000 calories per person to over 3,800 calories per person. A subsidized charity-based food systems byproduct of industrial ag ends up where? It ends up in poor neighborhoods. It's cheap with no nutritional value. And it doesn't take a rocket science to know this. This industrial food complex victimizes the poor. Long before COVID in New York City, there would be people standing on food lines and soup kitchens and food pantries. You could get your food mostly from Monday until Sunday. And we know for quite a long time that there has been a correlation between the food that we eat and our health. Unhealthy food winds up where? In poor neighborhoods, where healthy, organic food in affluent neighborhoods. And even though they tell us to eat healthy, the organic food is more expensive. And we also know that there's a high incidence of diet-related diseases, mostly in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color. Next slide. Yet we have these facts and statistics that tell us, frankly, like what's wrong with our community. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people calling my neighborhood such names as we live in a food desert. We live in a food swamp. And recently, folks, I heard the term food mirage. Come on. And I tell people, in fact, there are 40 million people living in poverty. And so we don't live in a desert. And I coined the term food apartheid. And I coined that term because I wanted people to start having these hard conversations around food, around justice, around demographics, and of course around race. And so when people use the term food deserts, I say it's a political construct and jargon, which is made to not really focus on the true problems of our food system, which is racial, and social injustice. So today we have this virus that's out there, and we know how important it is to eat healthy and be healthy. While my intentions of growing food was in the beginning that I really looked hard at doing, I realized that this food system was impacting so many social issues that I was seeing. I saw hunger. I saw poverty. I saw displacement right before my eyes. Next slide. You see, what I realized while I was growing food and hearing these social issues, that something was wrong. And I realized that food was impacting so many things that I was seeing. In terms of health, I saw the disparities when it came to type 2 diabetes and hypertension. Economics, I saw unemployment and low wages. Environment, I saw asthma. In housing, I saw a lack of affordable housing. The way the food system had impacted my community would question me to challenge the food system, realizing that if we don't talk about these issues, it reinforces a food system that is controlled by a handful of people, people with power over others. Food alone has no power, but has now become a commodity based on profits and not on people. Next slide. Two other terms that people seem to use time and time again are food justice and food sovereignty. So let's start first with food justice. This definition says represents a transformation of the current food system, including but not limited to eliminating disparities and inequities. And folks, I tell people time and time again, it doesn't exist. And so you're saying, wait a second, it doesn't exist. I say no. I say because it's been co-opted. People have used this term food justice to pad their programs, RFP, grants, mission, vision. And I say that because if you look at the word transformation, food justice is not a passive movement. It's an active movement. And so for me, in order for you to be doing food justice, you have to be working on dismantling the social injustices that you see. So some of the social injustices that are out there is, again, persistent race, gender, and class inequities. The lack of opportunity for people in communities to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. What does that mean? That means people having the power to make their own decisions. The injustice around lack of access to land. And now we're talking about reparations. People have had their land lost or stolen. This is a hard conversation, but a conversation we need to have. We're also talking about the injustice of living wage. I was so hopeful that the government would pass that $15 an hour minimum wage that for so long, since the 1960s, has been at what, $780? Who can live on that? Some of the injustice when we talk about the history of this food system, how our country was built on the backs of enslaved and indigenous people, that we don't have that hard conversation. And then lastly, talking about the power structure of our society. We have food and economic systems that are extractive. And I say that because most of the time, what do? We work outside our community. We bank outside our community. We travel outside our community. We work outside our community. So when you think about how do we correct this situation, it's through the lens of base building and communal wealth. So what does that look like? And so I like to, when I talk about what does that look like, I like to bring in the principles of food sovereignty. So here, again, food sovereignty quoted by La Via Campesina, which is a group that does a lot of work. They are indigenous and peasant farmers that are doing a lot of work. This definition says it's the right of people and governments to choose the way food is produced and consumed in order to respect our livelihoods, as well as the policies that support this choice. The goal is less dependency on capital intensive inputs that extract, and greater attention to the social and environmental principles that build communal wealth. In principle, it's about equity. It's about equity in the decision-making process and the distribution of resources and power back into the hands of the people. Power, hard, a drug, and people out there do not want to give up their power. However, as long as we have a food system that embraces a power dynamic society of power over people, it will remain stagnant and resistant to change. So from farm workers and growers to food and farm workers, a healthy system is not just about growing food, but making sure that there are parties along the way that are treated humanely and fairly. Like I said, food has become a commodity based on profits, not on people or the environment. In order for the food system to change, we must face the fact it's about two things: giving up or sharing power. A food system that is dominated by white privilege and wealth with a historical frame of power over others has to acknowledge that power and give it up. So in the very beginning, I asked the question, does the food system need to be fixed? And I say, no, it needs to change. And that change needs to be shifting power. We must shift the power dynamics of our food system that leaves the poor and communities of colorless, powerless, and victimized, always being seen on the receiving end with our hands out, instead of with our hands in the decision-making process. Next slide. We must recognize the true power lies in our community. More than ever, this pandemic has forced us to redefine what community looks like, understanding the power that we have collectively, which means changing the way we view ourselves and not how outsiders say or think we are or should be. Poor communities are always looked at in terms of deficits and problems and needs and scarcity. We need to focus within those communities about their strength, resiliency, creativity, and their capability and assets. We need to ask these communities not what they need, but what they want. Because when you ask a community what they need, it comes from a position of deficit. Ask a community what they want comes from a position of power. We must value the social capital and communal wealth that we have. So what does that mean, social capital? It means that everyone in this country has power and the right to say something and to make change. We must now engage our folks to focus on a local food system that supports local businesses and small farms and farm workers and locally grown food. We all know now who the essential workers are. Next slide. From our food system, if you look at it, on one hand, it's complex. On the other hand, it's simple. There are dots along the way that we must connect. From the person that puts that seed in the ground to the food that's on your plate. The time for talk is over. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Together, this food movement is ours to take back. COVID has shown us we cannot go back to the way things are. So how do we move forward in such a way that is powerful? We must all play a role in building a healthy food system that is fair, that is just, that is equitable, and it starts with each and every one of us. So now I'm going to leave you with this last quote. You see it on the screen. And I say, to grow your own food is power. To own your own land is powerful. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen Washington. We'll just jump to our next speaker and then we'll have some questions at the end. Our next speaker, Lina Puerta, was born in New Jersey and raised in Colombia and lives and works in New York City. Puerta holds an MS in education in art education from Queens College, CUNY, and has exhibited internationally. She is the 2019-2020 Artist in Residency at the Sugar Hill Children's Museum of Art and Storytelling in Harlem. She has also been honored with the 2017 New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Crafts and Sculpture. A fall 2017 Artist in Residency at the Joan Mitchell Center in New Orleans, and the 2016 Dieudonné Workspace Residency, as well as the Art Prize 8 Sustainability Award, among many others. Puerta's exhibition venues include the Ford Foundation Gallery, the Museum of Biblical Art, El Museo del Barrio, Socrates Sculpture Park, Wave Hill, and Geary Contemporary in New York City, 21C Museum Hotels in Louisville, Kentucky, and Benton, Arizona. I believe that's Arkansas, sorry, and Pi Artworks in London. Lina Puerta's work has been written about in Hyperallergic, the New York Times, the Brooklyn Rail, and ArtNet News, among others. Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much, Margaret, for the introduction, and Deborah Mutnick for the invitation. It's a great honor to be sharing the space here with you as well as with Karen. We can start with my slides, please. Thank you. So I am a mixed media artist with main focus on themes around nature and the body. But after the 2016 presidential election, I was struck by the national anti-immigrant rhetoric. And as a Latina woman, I felt the need to do something, but I wasn't quite sure how. Then a few months later, I was contacted by the Southern Foodways Alliance, which is a nonprofit based in Oxford, Mississippi, that studies culture through food. And they invited me with sponsorship from 21C to submit a proposal around Latino influence on food in the Southern US. So I did some research and I submitted a proposal of some paperwork honoring farm workers, Latino farm workers in the US. Next slide. This series consists of 7 tapestries that, like I said, honor Latino farm workers, and each one is based on a different crop in the U.S. So this is the chili pepper crop picker, and I use mainly the figure of the immigrant worker takes central stage in each work. Next. And in each piece, I also included not only the farm workers, but included the different parts of the plant that are, and so for next. So for instance, I included okay, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I also included quotes that I took from different news media that spoke of different social economic issues. In this case, the very low wages that the farm workers have in general. Next, for the very strenuous work. I included this image just to give an idea of the size, and that this work is handmade paper, meaning that I use paper as a medium. So here I'm in the studio, Dieudonné Studio, which is a professional handmade paper making studio, and I am taking a hose and I'm using the actual chili peppers as a stencil to create an image of the peppers themselves. So I am using them as a stencil, and with the water hose, the paper that is sitting on top or underneath the pepper is washed away. And the central figure here is covered with a piece of acetate. I am covering so the water does not remove the work that I had done on it already. Next. And this is the broccoli crop workers. And I was saying that I use parts of the plant, like in this case, on the top right corner, you can see a leaf of the broccoli, and I also included the flowers, the pollinators, and I was thinking of just the whole cycle that happens, and when the whole cycle that the plant goes through to yield fruit, and thinking of the farm workers as part of this cycle that is so beautiful and poetic. Next. In these works, next. And then in these works, I also use different textiles. I wanted it to have like a cheerful quality. And also, in this case, you can see on the bottom left corner parts of an embroidered huipil, which is a type of blouse used in Mexico, worn and made by one of the indigenous groups of Mexico and Guatemala and other countries. And so it was important for me to highlight some of the richness of the ancestral culture of the farm workers, which many of them have very prominent indigenous roots. I mean, next. And this is the strawberry crop picker. I also, in most of the works, most of this series, I try to include the entire body to emphasize all of the very strenuous physical work that is needed for in farm working. So here, this next, in this work, in the strawberry crops, and here it says they're nicknamed La Fruta del Diablo, which means the devil's fruit. And within the farm worker community, it's called La Fruta del Diablo because it's it's a killer on their backs because they have to bend down the entire day picking strawberries. Next. And then in 2018, I decided to, since the previous series was more focused on the bodies themselves, I created a series of portraits, smaller size, like this one. And here I use stencils for the plants around it, but I use a more free painting with paint pulp of the portraits of different farm workers that I sourced from online. And next, my idea was to bring some visibility to these faces or people that we never see through our food system. We normally, kids can name the different brands of, maybe some fruit. We recognize brands, but we don't recognize at all the plants, like what they even look like, or the people that pick the food or the vegetables and fruits for us. So I wanted to have a more frontal view, face to face with these with these important faces. Next. Then from here, I created a series where the plants took center stage. This is a series called the Wheeler Crops Festival series, and it's based on a New York Times story from 2016. Focus on the town of Willard, Ohio, which is an agricultural hub where cucumbers, cabbages, radishes, all the lettuces that are mostly from the Northeast, they usually come from there. And so every year for decades, the town of Willard would hold a festival to welcome the immigrant workers that would pick and tend to the crops of Willard, Ohio, or of that area. But because of the anti-immigrant sentiment, the festival was canceled. So I decided in reflecting about plants and farm workers, I started to realize that that there was a connection between plants and between plants and people and farm workers, as they are both oppressed as these plants, as we know in industrial agriculture, that these plants there's monocultures are not so great. Anyway, there are many ways, but so I imagine these plants holding a festival for the farm workers. So I dressed them up in very cheerful colors. And so the previous piece, it's called Cucumber Cheer. And this piece is Cabbage Fiesta. Next. Also including a lot of the materials from different materials, including textiles from Latin America. And this is Cabbages and Radishes Parade. And there are some around the edge, you can see some hands that are also depicted in colorful ways and vibrant colors. And the idea is to kind of show like a solidarity or a kinship between them. Next. And then from reflecting on this work more deeply, here you can see the hand on the left more clearly. So from reflecting on this work more deeply next, I did the kinship series, which I had made at Dieudonné at the paper studio in 2000, at the end of 2019. And then during the lockdown in 2020, I was able to finish them, and by finish them, I mean in this case, like adding the velvet ribbon around the edge and also painting on top with gouache. So this is Tomatoes and I from the Kinship series, and it's thinking about our not only thinking of the farm worker as a gardener, and also thinking of our relationship, putting ourselves in the shoes of the farm worker as gardener, and thinking of reflecting on this relationship with plants and with the plants that sustain us, and the synergy between them, this energy between plants and us as part of as something inherent in us. Next. This is a close-up of Tomatoes and I in black. And I use these googly eyes also to maybe, I work kind of intuitively, so I just, some decisions just kind of happen, but now in retrospect, I think there is like a magical or spiritual quality there to that relationship. Next. This is another one, Tomato Leaf and I in yellow, and kind of, again, trying to emphasize the connection between human and plants as living beings, as part of, as family, you know, the kinship. Next. And this is a close-up, and I think that's the last of my slides. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Wow, wonderful. It's all inspiring. It's wonderful. So now I thought maybe we do a little bit of a moderated discussion and then open it up. I see we've already got a number of questions in the Q&A, so we'll get to those in a second. But before we start that, I was wondering if either of you would like to address anything in the others' presentation. They're so, in some ways, complementary presentations and maybe differences in ideas as well. So I wonder if you wanted to respond to each other in some way.
I definitely, because I love Luna. I met her just recently, but I think, when all movements, as an activist and as a person that speaks the words, it's so good to have the interpretation of artists like Luna and musicians and poets that can articulate our true feeling. And ever since I've seen her work, I'm just so mesmerized, because sometimes you can't articulate how you feel, and you need that person who's artistic that can show exactly the inner workings of how people feel, that drama, that trauma, that celebration. And Luna does that. Luna does that. You can see it in her pictures. I'm serious. You can see, the pain, the sorrow, the celebration. And sometimes that's missing when you convey with a spoken word, but when you have it right in your face to look at, it's powerful. So I just love that. And I love her too.
Thank you. It's mutual feeling. But it's harder for me to say in words, but just super touched by your words and your presence, Karen. Super honored. Thank you.
Same here.
Oh, wonderful. And One other thing I'd like to address is I know that in the audience, they look a little, anonymous at this point, but I know some of those people in the audience, and many of them are, I would say at least 10 to 15 of them are young people, some students here at Long Island University, and they're finding themselves. And I'm so happy that they get a chance to hear you both today, because many of them are really looking for a path to doing meaningful work. And I guess I'm just wondering if you maybe want to touch a little bit upon finding your paths, and any advice or any kind of reflective thought about like those college students or young people in the audience who I'm sure are very moved by what you said, your presentations, and maybe are thinking about, what they're passionate about or what they want to do.
Okay. Well, for me, I have to be an artist is a difficult career, but and I had to, when I graduated from school, I had to teach full time for 10 years, and that was I thought that would be the perfect job for me as an artist, because I had, in some cases, a good part of the afternoon off, and I had summers off, etc. But it was hard for me. I know for many artists they can manage both, but for me, I was not able to do any of my work, any of my artwork while being a full-time teacher. And I had a very very strong need to make art, and I knew it was a difficult decision. I mean, it wasn't for me a difficult decision. It was a difficult decision to the outside world. But for me, I knew inside of me that this is what I needed to do. And it was risky because I was leaving a good job behind with, benefits, health insurance, everything that they tell you you need to have. But when you have a passion that is very strong, I feel that, and also, I have to say that, it has been about 16 years since I quit my full-time job, and teaching has been good for me because I have done it throughout my career and it has helped me. But and there have been times when finances are very difficult. I'm not going to say there aren't, but one thing that I believe completely in is that when I do my work faithfully and truthfully, everything kind of falls in place. And sometimes when I'm like, I don't know, my bank account is super low, I don't know what to do, something happens. Something happens, either, maybe there's a sale, or there's a gig, or there's a talk, or there's something. So I think you have to kind of trust, and as long as you believe in your gift and you stay true to it, I think things will work out.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I have I just invite you to speak on a couple of other things. One I think I mentioned previously in a previous conversation, and I guess this is directed a little bit more towards Karen, but I think maybe it applies as well to Lina. About, I guess it was on February 9th, maybe a few weeks ago, some legislation was introduced about, and I can see in some of the comments, access to land being an issue, and so on. The Justice for Black Farmers Act was introduced, and I know that a lot of Karen's talk was about just issues about justice, and I wondered if either of you had been following any of this legislation and proposed legislation that was put forth by Senator Cory Booker and Senator Raphael Warnock and Elizabeth Warren. And I'm just wondering if that is something that is on your radar, and if you think access to land, which seems to be a theme that's emerging in the Q&A, is especially for Black farmers, is if this kind of legislation is a good step forward.
Let me tell you, access to land we've been fighting for decades. This is not, not nothing new. The history about how even indigenous people were eradicated and moved from their land, and then African Americans, because of Black codes, racism, during the Great Migration, people now recognize that there is strength and power in land ownership. Back in the day when I was growing up, people had land in the South, and a lot of people said they would never go back. They let the land go. Now people are realizing that's legacy, that's power, ownership. And so now people are trying to hold on to land and get land as well, but also trying to find out how can we do reparations in such a way that's fair and just. Now with the Black Farmer Act, thank goodness we're starting having a conversation about land, but we have to make sure that when we talk about giving land into the hands of a particular group, that we don't replicate the oppressor. And so it's not only Black land, it's brown land, it's indigenous land. So we need to have that common conversation to make sure at the end of the day that repair is being done, and having those conversations. Even in cities, in urban areas, I've been fighting for land protection in New York City since the 1980s. And again, people, right now in urban areas, there is a problem. There's a struggle between land development, housing, and open space. And so again, how do we work to make sure that open space is still preserved, but yet at the end of the day, it's people that own it. And I say to people in urban areas, you know what? Land development and land ownership is just as safe as the present administration, and continue to be proactive instead of reactive. Right now is the time, especially in New York City, when we have like 12 candidates that are coming up for mayor. It's like, so what are we going to do when it comes to urban agriculture and land space? And at the end of the day, who owns it? So a great question continues to be in the dialogue in this conversation around land, because at the end of the day, land is legacy, land is power. Great question.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yes, I think that addresses a couple of the questions in the Q&A as well. And I see another one that's sort of related to the one I was going to ask about community gardens. And, those of us, I see a lot of community gardens in the audience today, and people who deal, as a community gardener myself, and dealing with a lot, there's some heartbreak that happens when you're a community gardener, and a lot of times it has to do with developers or college administrations or something like this. And I think if you had to think about, what's the best
power. I mean, just what I talked about, folks, listen to me. We have been brainwashed. We have given up our power. And this is why now with COVID, folks, it's time to think collectively and have voices like Luna and others to help project what it means to own land. We have to start really looking at our power that we have collectively. The only reason why things are happening because we allow things to happen. We allow things to happen. There has to be accountability when there are people in office that you vote to. So when it comes to the land issue, like for us, when Giuliani back in 1998 tried to auction off 100 community gardens, bulldozed in the middle of the night, we didn't know what to do. Individually, we didn't know what to do. And he was trying to pick individual gardens. What we did is that we came collectively, that's number one, as gardeners, but then we went out to the community and we got artists and we got we got musicians, and we got housing advocates, we had community organizing groups coming together to back us up as one. Got the ear of the Attorney General Elliot Spitz at that time and said what the mayor did was wrong. Again, what can we do collectively that we're not doing? One voice is weak. Many voices is strong. And now is the time to make your, we marched down in City Hall, we marched, we did those things. And so again, when I talk about, remember when I talked about food justice? It's an active movement. It's not a passive movement. And for so long, people have been silent and complacent, and they expect other people to do the work. You got to do the work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I guess I'll just move into some of these other questions here. One is, can you share any experiences with farmers, cooperatives, and collective ownership?
I think that's for you, Karen.
I think it's fair to let's have Luna ask for some questions.
Yeah, a lot of a lot of support. There, one anonymous attendee just has said I've never seen water stencil work before. Love that real peppers were part of the process. I'm very familiar with the visual of farm workers bent over in the workers' stance, and I've spent a lot of time in this stance as well, seeing it honored in this way. So lovely.
I think, I mean, this is not an answer to a question, but I guess I feel that, I think reacting to what Karen said in her presentation is that like these issues for me, I feel that these issues with the farm workers that, you know, they're in many places of the US, they're considered a modern way of slavery because of all the hardship they go through. And it's not, you know, and it's very convenient when they're undocumented because that way you can abuse their service and their bodies, you know, that's what we're doing again. And I think that, like, to build on what Karen said, that I don't think food justice is just to change one thing. We need to change our entire system. Like, we are all complicit because we are part of the system. And we can make small changes that can create, if we are all together, we can create small changes. And one of those changes is just in our own, the way we relate to nature in general. So for instance, because I don't think farm workers, I think it's going to be hard to, I mean, we can fight to raise the minimum wage or to have the farm workers be giving citizenship, etc. We can fight for all of that, and we should, but it's still, the whole system is set up in a way where we're not only people, but plants and the environment is being abused. So what has been revealed to me, and I'm trying to wrap this up quick, what has been revealed to me through the work, through the artwork, is that we have a connection. We are part of this, we are nature. So we are part of this ecosystem. And if we start to see ourselves as part of it, as we are needed by the plants, we are welcomed and loved by the plants, then it really changes everything. Like we are missing out by not being part of these plants and looking and cultivating and foraging and with love and empathy as for them as living beings. And one thing that has stayed for me with like research is that, for instance, like farm worker companies or corporations, they would love to not have to use bodies and just use machines. And for instance, our tomatoes are collected by machines, but those tomatoes get bruised. So those tomatoes are used for canning only. So our cans are from those bruised tomatoes. But the tomatoes that make it into our salad have to be hand picked. So it's like we are needed. We are part of the plant in some way. We are part of the cycle of the plant. And that to me changed everything. So how can I honor this plant and the farm worker, not seeing them separate? I can honor it by making sure that tomato I buy does not go to waste. And that if I have to peel it or some of it has to be thrown away, I can compost it, or that I only buy the tomato that I'm going to consume this week and not put a whole bunch that I'm going to just toss away, So it's about having respect. So I think those small things that we can instill in younger generations and in our culture, we can start to think differently and start to appreciate more the nature that we have around us and that we have in the fridge. Thank you. Sorry if I talked too long.
Following up on the tomatoes, no, it's wonderful. One of the commenters, Vito Wallace, says that noticed that there were hairs on the tomato stalks and on the hands. Was that a conscious decision in your artwork? It seemed like it's sort of like,
Yeah. Yes, it was sort of. I mean, it wasn't. I liked how it looked, and then I realized. I mean, in part, I liked how it looked, and in another part, I was trying to emphasize the synergy, that connection between us, between the plants and us, or between the plants and the farmer, us gardener.
And Anika asks, what does decolonizing the diet mean for you? I guess this is open to both of you.
I mean, that's your interpretation. I mean, decolonizing the diet. I mean, listen to me. I'm not going to get into semantics because I got daggone too much work to do. I mean, first of all, questions to ask about what is it that people with power and privilege who are white allies want to do. Sometimes I tell them with respect is sometimes y'all got to get out the way. Get out the way and support, Black, brown, indigenous people to do the work. Like I said, give up power. I tell people 3 things with power. Either you're going to give it up, you share it, or take it away. And I tell white allies, again, to speak up and speak out when you see injustice. It's more difficult to do that than to be able to say, well, I understand. No, you don't understand. It's really to speak up, speak out to support. And then also when it comes to support, it's easy to write a check, which is all well and good. Definitely we take money. But the bottom line is then how do you do investment? And investment means relationships. So how do you make relationships within organizations that you can support over a period of time? And the last thing that I want to say is that with young Black and brown youth that are out there, that are listening here today, listen to me. You stand on the shoulders of kings and queens. The reason why we were brought here as Africans enslaved was because of our knowledge of agriculture. Look at the color of your skin. Your skin is soil. So don't let anyone say that you come from a framework around slavery and slave mentality. No, there's a richness in the work and the way that you do your work, and the people that came behind you that are suffering so that you can do great things. Shout it out to the universe, your hopes and your dreams, and someone will capture those hopes and dreams and make it true. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you look at yourself as being powerful and not powerless. Don't listen to people that say you can't do. Listen to those and listen to yourself to say that you can do.
Yes, I would add, and along the same line, is that for me, as a Latina Colombian, my heritage is Colombian, and I am part indigenous and part colonizer or part European, and it's a hard path to grasp with because the indigenous side of me has been was repressed and was stripped away, and so I think one way of decolonizing is to one, listen to indigenous. We have so much. There are so many valuable teachings from indigenous, African, Aboriginal cultures that really knew. I mean, they had it right. I mean, they were around for, so much longer, and they knew what was important and how to relate to nature. And then in the last, centuries, we have just turned it all into a mad world where everything is a commodity, where everything has a monetary value, and we need to change all of that. So to decolonize, we have to decolonize our minds and decolonize. And for me, my process is to learn from indigenous cultures, especially because we're here on their land in this country. We're on indigenous land, and they have a very different approach to the whole living world around us. So that's something that I would look into more. And also, I will say again that honor the food that you buy and take by not wasting it and by treating it with respect. Mm-hmm.
One anonymous attendee wants to know, does Lina have art for sale?
Always. Yes.
Okay, so they could reach out to either the organizers, or we could put you in contact if you.
Yes.
You
or you can go through I have a website, linapuerta.net, and I have where you can contact me through there. I also have Instagram at Lina Puerta Art, since you asked. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I have another question. I don't know if you can see them. I mean, you can feel free to choose them if the panelists.
Yes, I see.
Oh, okay. So maybe if you have one you really want to address, or.
But Karen, I don't know. I don't want to take over the.
No,
I've talked enough.
No. I think someone asked about resources.
Mm-hmm.
In nonprofit, I think resources and stuff like that. And what we're trying to do in New York City, we just started this fund called the Black Farmer Fund. And the reason why we started that fund is because Black farmers and Black businesses. Well, let me just sort of backtrack and give you an update of the pretense. In New York State, we have 57,000 farmers and only 139 are Black.
Mm.
So That's why this work is so dear to me, y'all. And so, again, these farmers have been shut out of loans, USDA applications that take a Harvard degree to fill out. And so we decided, let's try to form a fund specifically for Black farmers and Black businesses that would be around, that would intentionally be around base building, communal wealth, talking about financial education, literacy, how to invest, because those things are not talked about in our community. And so we developed that fund to start in 2019, 2020. We've done extremely well. We've got no money at all from the government. The money that we have gotten is from donors, outside donors who understand how critical it is. And then we have a community of people that are making the decisions on how that money is going to be dealt. So as a board member and some of the founding members, we don't have any say on how that money is being spent. It's the community putting power back in the hands of the community to make decisions. So those that are out there trying to get funding, it's your story, it's your dream, it's your mission. And there are people that are going to help and support you, because to believe it or not, the nonprofit, where it's good in terms, but it's really at the end of the day not sustainable, because you're living on grants. You're living on grants. Every year you're living on grants. So something to think about.
Wonderful. Okay.
I wanted to, address a question here from Alice Cortez regarding that. She was wondering why there are not so many women faces in the work when Latino women are so related to work and farms and with food. It's true, the Latino women are very present in the food farming business and our crop pickers, and they are. I did include them. It's just that it's hard sometimes to. In fact, one of the portraits was inspired on a woman's. It was based on a woman's portrait, but it's hard to. Sometimes the features cannot reveal if it's the gender, and it was hard because I was trying to make the point that they read like women, but they could read like both. And sometimes I feel like that's good that it could read like either gender. And also because they're so covered because of the pesticides, and they're also have to dress in jeans. So there sometimes it's not easy to give away their give away visually that they're women when they're dressed like men. I guess they could be read more as men, but many of them are women. And one of the farm worker tapestries I do, and one of the quotes, I do include a quote about women and sexual abuse in the fields. So that was definitely in my mind when doing this. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Someone also asked a question, like what in terms of, I think some pathways to counteract, I guess, food apartheid. And so another thing, I talked about the history, first of all, be informed of your history on why, as an African-American, your ancestors were brought here. That's number one. But number two, to look at the future, I would love everyone to be a farmer, don't get me wrong, but there are positions in agriculture that's definitely needed as we go in terms of technology. The global agricultural system is dominated by women, yet women don't have access to technology nor land. And so I would like to see a lot of young people really involved with STEM education. Science and technology and engineering is going to be, and math is going to be so important for the future in terms of data, in terms of finding technical ways of how to, not to grow more, but to grow better and more efficient, especially in the light of climate change. And so if there's any way in terms of people taking agriculture and turning, looking towards STEM, and especially during technology, that's exactly what we're going to need. We're going to need statisticians. We're going to need people to collect data. We're going to need people to find new ways on how to, how to grow better, how to plant in the midst of climate change when water is being decreased, temperatures are rising. And so you look at that, look at the scientists, look at technology, look at engineering as a way to open the door through agriculture. My 2 cents.
I also wonder how we could, in the cities, how could we increase, I don't know, this is a question. How can we increase access to farming in the city? Like maybe we can, I don't know, use some common land for, I'm thinking of like parks, maybe. Like I think it would be interesting, and I think it might very well happen in the future, that, and it would be good to start visualizing parks, having part of the parks be farming, and starting to, just because I don't know why we have it separate. Like that's just not, like that, you know what I mean?
Heresy.
Yes, why?
It's people don't want to see brown and black people in their park farming. Are you kidding? What? You can see black and brown people farming in Central Park? Really? Oh, no, that is not happening.
Well,
but your idea is good. You know what?
no,
This is the youth of the future.
I think we need to, I think we will, with climate change, we're going to get there. I mean, I think whether we want or not, we must start doing that, because if we want to, because as we see what happened in Texas, like it's just, climate is just going to be, it's going to be hard to be shipping, we can't count on avocados being shipped from, or coconuts being shipped from the South or from other parts for too long. So we need to have more land and more areas, I don't know, maybe more green rooftops, and more lawns. Like my building has a beautiful, this is a very old building. Back in the 50s, they thought of like incorporating landscape to buildings. Now that's not now it's all maximizing space for profit. But these areas could be, we could start thinking of land not just as ornamental nature. Like ornamental could be mixed in with, like, I think food plants are so beautiful. Why are they excluded from from the ornamental garden,
But
like,
I
we
think
need to
something
start bringing them in.
But what was positive with COVID, to tell you the truth, one thing was positive with COVID, because my email and my phone was off the hook, because all of a sudden people understood eating healthy, being healthy, because, waiting for the vaccine, they needed to be healthy. And so they were asking about how to turn their front lawns, their backyard. People started to do that. People were asking how to grow on terraces, windowsills. Right now, you can hardly get seeds now. I mean, people are thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And so that's a good thing. What COVID has done is that the seed companies are going crazy, running out of seeds, because we're trying to do our planting, our crop planting now. And it's hard because people now understand they want to grow their own food now. And so, like I said, front yards, backyards, windowsills, terraces, all people are doing that. And also trying to get into our community gardens. We have 400 community gardens throughout the city and about 300 of school gardens. and a couple of hundred of community-based land trusts. I'm sorry, not land trust, but under Parks for Trust for Public Land, and also New York Restoration Project. And so there are groups out there that are now really inviting people to farm. And then I have to do one more plug. We have Farm School, the New York School of Urban Agriculture, Farm School
Wow,
NYC,
that's great.
that is out there, again, learning how to farm, but through the lens of food justice. I had to put that plug in, sorry.
Okay, wonderful. There's one question I thought maybe might be nice to address if you feel like it. It's what recommendations do you have for building community-led art and farm partnerships? It seems like you have such a good partnership in terms of presenting your work together. I wonder if you've thought about that.
Being with Luna, I'm thinking about it. Are you kidding?
Let's
But
do it.
I always, no, but seriously, but I always thought about, within the garden to bring in artists. We have open mic, in gardens where people come and do their poetry. But it'll be good to also to share the artists that are in the neighborhood, the musicians that are in the neighborhood, because again, it's about building community in that like I said, with that diagram, it's not about growing food, but how do we grow community?
Yes,
And
exactly.
being with Luna the last couple of months really has, and her work has really said some, got me thinking about there's so many artists that are out there that need to have some sort of venue for self-expression. And why not a garden? You know what I'm saying? Why not a garden? And so thank you, Luna, for the work that you do, and definitely has really up my thought process about really reaching out to artists in general. So, and I'm going to buy one of your artwork. So,
Oh, it would be my honor. Yeah, sorry.
Wonderful. There are a few more questions. It sounds like, you a lot of them. One by, I know if there's one by Amanda B who asked about, she writes, I was recently working with some colleagues in Mississippi who encounter racism in gardening coming through as poverty. Some Black people are turning away from gardening and farming in that area because it equates them to slavery, to poverty. Is this something that you've seen in your communities, and how can we counter that? The culture that rejects.
Because they've been brainwashed about the truth. And, I mean, you're not getting those truths in a history book. It's hard for people even now to talk about undoing racism. As soon as people, as soon as you're like on a panel or in a webinar or in a room at work, and someone wants to bring up, let's start talking about racism, people sort of turn off, and we have to have those hard conversations, folks. I know people get tired of hearing it, but you can't get tired of it if people are still struggling, still struggling to try to be human, to be treated as human, and to also to be heard. I think that's the most important thing. People, we're in the greatest country in the world, and I question, why is there hunger and poverty? Why is there wealth inequality? Why are people on food lines, soup kitchens, and what is it about this country that we have 1% of the population with wealth and 99% of the population is struggling? There's something wrong with that picture. And so what is it that is holding us back? Is it fear? And a lot of it is fear. When you have people saying those people, they're gonna do, who are those people and who are they? Everyone know who they is, know who those are. And so, and then people forgot their history. Who came here? You know what I'm saying? Who was here before, indigenous people? And when I get upset when people all of a sudden, because when Europeans came here, when Irish people came here, when Italian people came here, they were all suffering like everyone else. And then so how do you turn your back to a new wave of immigrants that are trying to do the same as your forefathers? How do you forget that so fast? You know, and again, out of sight, out of mind, and we don't talk about our history in a way that embodies those that want to come here, just like your family came here for a better life. What has happened? Where's the roadblock? How did you get here?
I think that's very important what Karen just said, and researching a little bit of indigenous culture. Now I don't remember who said, but one thing that I remember is that I think it's for the Aymara in Bolivia, one of the native cultures. They look at the future. They don't have future. The future is the past. So in order to move forward, you need to have the past in front of you. So if that is their teaching, and I think that is so important that we must keep that past very present in our in order to move forward, and like Karen said, not let ourselves be brainwashed and understand and not lose sight of our path forward. I also want to add, because before I got nervous from all that love Karen gave me. I couldn't speak. But I wanted to say that I think it's so important to have these interdisciplinary type of talks and panels, because even though I love my artist community, sometimes it's like we are preaching to the choir, you know, like or singing to the choir. So I think we need to include all kinds of voices and everything, and in all aspects of life, in government and everything. I think it would be just much more helpful and more productive. So I very much appreciate being here. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Just following up on what you just said, one of the questions was from a librarian who, and her question was from Kate Angel, and she wanted to know what can librarians do to fight for food justice and justice in terms of farm and agricultural workers.
Have speakers come, do seminars and webinars, have speakers come from different backgrounds. I mean, you have the venue there. You have the venue, you have the books there, you know, invite guest speakers that are authors to come and speak about things. I mean, you have power right then and there. Again, you have the venue to allow those who have been so long voiceless to be able to speak, and also for people to hear what the truth is, and also to hear about their own culture. I think sometimes that's, you know what I don't like, and I'm not trying to downplay, but I don't like when other people talk about other people's culture. You know, if I want to hear about Mexican culture, I want to hear from a Mexican. If I want to, I want those voices, and not other people's voices interpreting, you know, what their culture should be. And I've been in places where that has happened. I find it offensive, because you're speaking for these people, but I want to see the people speak for themselves. So the librarian, it's your call. You got the venue. Bring in the speakers, and the audience will show up.
Yes, for sure. I second that, and also you have a lot of power as a librarian because we need more books, more diversity in books. Like I use the library, but I can't. I know that, for instance, not right now, like I mentioned, I've been very interested in indigenous culture and also indigenous voices from my own background, and it's hard to find books. There are no books like that in the library here. You have to, I just get it through friends, and also having more audiobooks it's also great because for me, it's easier to have an audiobook while I'm working. I can listen to the book. So that is a great source, and also ebooks today, because I go into the library and many books that I want to read, like on environment or indigenous knowledge, not many of them are not available. So maybe do some research and find and make it more diverse. You have that power.
I'll just add to that Karen Washington and Lina Puerta sent us this wonderful list of readings, including Braiding Sweetgrass, Farming While Black, Freedom Farmers, The Color of Money, just in the film Taking Root of Wangari about Wangari Maathai, and incredible resources that they provided to the group, and we'll have a bibliography of reading suggestions available to everyone, and we can send those out to you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I see we're sort of drawing a little bit close to 5:30 here. So I just it's awkward when there isn't an audience to do a standing ovation, or allow me to I'll stand give a standing ovation, and thank our speakers so much for sharing their ideas and perspectives, and for playing off each other so well, and listening to us and sharing their perspectives. It's been a wonderful experience, and I'll just remind everyone that our next event is a month from today, and it's on urban health in the time of COVID, and it'll be with Anjali Sauthoff. And then on Earth Day, around there, we have climate change and the future of the planet with Cynthia Rosenzweig, who's a senior researcher at NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Science. But anyway, any final reflections before we head off? Or?
Well, for me, I imagine a future that revolves around nature and our love for nature. I think it's possible. Not a future focused on individual success and individual profit, or
And my parting words are, if you look at the word agriculture, what's missing is culture. So let's really focus on culture because it embodies diversity.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
That's so great.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and for tuning in. And
bye, everybody.
Great. And
big kiss to you, Karen and Margaret.
I'm going right now
Deborah.
on the website and buy a painting.
Oh, no, we'll talk. Yes.
Bye now.
Let's talk. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
So I guess people are leaving.
Mhm.
That one,
I see we're still recording. I guess we could stop.
we can stop recording for sure.